Hey guys, welcome to Rockford Ordnance, and today we're going to show you how to do something that might elude a few of you, but we've got a new rifle that we're having a ton of fun with, and we're going to pretty her up a bit and put her back to how she looked while she was in service. I've taken the liberty of already disassembling it, but maybe you can see here, what is it? Well, it's an AK, and you can see the long barrel, but something's missing here. I've disassembled everything already. This will probably give it away. It's an RPK, guys. This is a Romanian AES-10B, built by Cougar in Romania. And here in the States, this is probably the closest thing you will get to an actual RPK. You know, there's plenty of clones built and all this, but this built in a factory, a com block factory, and brought here is the closest thing we're going to get. So what I'm going to show you today, you know, these come from, are imported by Century, and I don't know if it's Cougar or Century. They do quite a bit of sanding on the wood on these things, and we're just going to pretty up the wood and put it back to how it was. When these were in service, they had a nice coating of amber shellac on them. And guys, this video will go for those of you that own Wasrs too. You can do the same thing. I've already done it to that. So I wasn't going to bore you with the disassembly. We've disassembled it. And I've gotten a lot of questions from people, and I've seen in other videos where they have a problem getting the stock out of the receiver. Now, I started doing this before I thought about putting a video together, so I've already driven it out. But essentially what I did, and it was tight, it was in there good, I've just put it back in to show you. Basically what I do on this stock, on the club feet, it's real easy. All we're going to do is put a rag over the end of it to protect it and give her a few wallops with the rubber mallet. And I think it took me 6 or 7 hits and it came right out. And now that I've put it back in, you can see how tight it is. I just put this in by hand. Well, there we go, pulled right out. Another way to do it if you're having a hard time or you're doing it on the Wasr is there's a little room in here between the trunnion and the bottom of the receiver. You got to take the trigger group out and everything, but a lot of times I'll get a 3/8 extension and put it in there and give it a tap, the extension a tap with that, and it'll drive it out, okay? Now beware when you're putting them back in, if they are tight from refinishing, or they swell up, it's humid out when you're doing it or whatever, be very careful. Don't just pound those things in. A few light taps, fine. But you can expand that receiver and cause some problems. So don't be walloping the shit out of the thing trying to get it in there after you refinish it. Anyhow, I'm going to show you how we're going to clean that wood up and how we're going to refinish it and put it back together and show you the end product, so stay tuned. So we've got it disassembled and we've got the wood. Here's the stock and here's the foregrip. You can see the difference in the colors of the wood. Let me get a camera here. You can see the difference in the colors of the wood. And the reason being is I've cleaned this one already. And for those of you that have something similar on a Wasr or whatnot, you can do the same thing. This really wasn't that dirty compared to some that I've seen. So rather than take an aggressive approach to cleaning it, I took a real mild approach to it. And that's what you want to do, guys. When you got something that's not that bad, why go to these extremes and possibly hurt what you're working on, destroy it, etc. So what I did was, it was pretty well sanded from Cougar, and this was new old stock. It was never fired. So all I did was most of the cosmoline was gone already. All I did was take a little Dawn dish soap, and for those of you that know Dawn dish soap, it cuts grease real well. So I just put it on a scrubby sponge and wrung it out real good. You don't want to get it too wet. And just wet the wood a little bit, and then scrubbed with the pad side and then the other side, and it got all the dirt. You can always see in some of the on the laminates, you can see dirt that develops in between. So when you got that clean, you know you've got it pretty darn good. So this one's clean and this one isn't. You can probably see, you know, some of the lines in there that are still dirty. So and you can see some of the original shellac in there and how much darker it is. And that's what we're going for, guys. That's what we're going to try and replicate, is that shellac in there. Now, it's amber shellac and it's gotten a little darker in age from oil and whatnot and sitting, but it's going to come out gorgeous and golden and show off some of the darker spots from the laminate, and when we're done, it's going to be absolutely beautiful. So let's get to it. I'll show you how I'm going to scrub this, then we let it dry. You don't even have to go overnight. You can go a couple hours. It's dry enough to put a light sanding on in the shellac. I don't want to put much more sanding on it because I don't want to get rid of the contrast between the laminate glue and the laminate, because it's going to make a nice just looking final product, and it's going to enhance all the lines in the laminate here. It's going to look great. So like I said, really all we got to do, dampen the sponge a little bit, put a little Dawn on there, rub it in a little bit, and get a nice coating on there. Hope you can see this here. And just foam it up. Get it all on there. And then I switch over to the scrub side. Now, my wife's not home right now, so I'm using the kitchen. Otherwise, I'd be out in the garage at the work sink out there. But hey, what you don't know won't hurt her. So we're just gonna give it a scrub. And then I don't even rinse it. I wring out the sponge and wipe the foam off. We don't want to get it too wet. It takes too long to dry, slows us down. And I'm not going to worry about the insides too much. We're going to leave that intact. I got most of the cosmoline out of the grooves here and all. And that's that. It's all scrubbed up. I'm going to rinse this sponge out, get the foam off of here, and we'll be good to go, guys. Then the next step will be a light sanding, 220. Get rid of any lines real light. You know, Century or Cougar or whoever redid these Wasrs and all with the military wood, they sand them already. I don't know why they don't just leave them alone with the old shellac on them, but I guess they think pretty sanded wood sells to the guys that aren't doing the collecting, you know. Me personally, I'd like what came from the factory. So, set this aside here. Really, when you dry it off, you'll see how much dirt it actually took off. And the wood is so much brighter, so much cleaner. Nowhere near, that was all dirt, guys. Look at how nice that is. That's awesome. So, now we're gonna go to the sanding and we're gonna go to the finishing, and we'll be right back. Okay guys, we're back, and we showed you how to clean the wood. It came out really nice, really bright, looks great. All we did was a little light sanding. Like I said, we didn't want to take off too much of that glue layer that looked really nice in contrast to the wood, and it's going to look great when it's finished. So just took some 220 sandpaper, and guys, this is something you can do on the cheap. You can go to the dollar store and get a pack of these. It's got 3 different kinds of sandpaper, but 220 Little light sanding just to remove any a little of any dirt that may be left, and just some of the sanding lines that Century or whoever gouged in there. Remove those, little sanding, and a quick wipe down. And then we went to a shellac finish. You can use any brand. This happens to be Zinsser Bullseye Amber Shellac. It comes in clear and amber. Use the amber. That's what they used in all the arsenals, and some like the Russian. There's a lot of debate over that, what they used, but a lot of it was much darker red, unlike some of the crazy reds you see today. But amber shellac, it'll start out almost clear, and the more coats you put on, the better it'll look. So right now, we sanded it, and I put on a couple coats. All we use for that, the best thing I found, are these sponge brushes. Again, you can get a pack of these for $1, literally at the dollar store. They work great. Trick to shellac is make sure that you're not going over the same area a bunch of times. You leave brush marks. One pass if possible, and then blend the next area in at the wet line that you left. Blend that in. One pass, two passes at the most. Thin coats. Let it dry. If you start putting on super heavy coats or not letting it dry in between, but mostly heavy coats, it'll feel dry. You'll go to buff it or go to put the next coat on or whatever, and it's still soft underneath, and it'll gum up on you, take forever to dry. So light coats are better. If you want more to make it darker, just keep adding coats. I'm going to show you here. The handguard, the upper handguards on these are always lighter and kind of plain Jane, but it came out, this has got 3 coats on it right now, and it's lighter. I haven't touched it yet. It's dry, but I'm gonna let this dry overnight, and then hit it with some 4-aught steel wool, and that'll smooth it out. It'll be like glass. You just buff it with that, and if you go through in a couple areas, you know, put another coat on. But I usually, after the second or third coat, I start hitting it with that 4-aught steel wool in between coats just to smooth out any runs or drips. If you get runs or drips, that steel wool is your friend. It'll take care of all those. You can rub them out, and don't get any ideas. You can rub them out and make it nice and smooth for that next or final coat. Let's take a look at the lower handguard here. This has still got a little stick to it, but you can see how beautiful that came out. Really nice. You can see the transitions between the laminate glue and the laminate itself, and it's getting that golden color and accentuating the others darker. This, like I said, this actually has a couple drips in it right here, and those will be gone once I hit it with steel wool. Let's take a look at the stock, which, God, I love this thing. It's absolutely stunning. Let's take a quick look here. Came out just gorgeous, if you can see that. Looks really nice. Flip it over here for you. Again, really nice. And that's only 3 coats, and you can still see, if you can see them, some of the sanding lines in there. Like I said, I didn't hit it hard, but I'll build up this coat of shellac till those are gone, and then buff it down with the 4-aught steel wool, and the whole finish will just be like glass. It'll be absolutely gorgeous. So 3 coats in, I'm gonna let it dry for the night. In the morning, I will buff it with some 4-aught steel wool, and then we'll see how many more coats we're gonna put on. I probably usually end up between 6, 7, and 10, somewhere in there roughly. But again, as you get more and more coats on, it takes a little longer to dry, and you'll hit it with that steel wool and it'll start gumming up on you. You don't want that to happen. Then you got other problems. You gotta wait for it to dry, and yeah, it's a big mess. So make sure you let it dry long enough in between. When she's all done and buffed out, we'll come back and take another look. I'll show you, I got some packs of steel wool, and it's This happens to be 3/0, but you can see it comes in all different coarsenesses or fineness, whatever. But 4/0 is what you want, 4 zeros. And it's super, super fine. 3 is good maybe for the light stuff, but the final pass you'll want the 4/0. And that's about it, guys. We'll put a few more coats, we'll buff it down, and we'll finish this video up, okay? Talk to you in a little bit. Okay, guys, we've done a little refinishing, and right now we have 3 layers, maybe 4, of shellac on here. And let me show you this. What a change, huh? Quite a bit different. Really brought out those colors of the laminate glue and the wood. But if you can see close up, let me see if you can see a lot of sand lines, things like that. Grooves, different flaws in it that really stand out with the shiny shellac. And those aren't anything you have to worry about. One of the great things with using shellac is that we can fix those and without taking any more of the wood away. When we build up the shellac layer, if you remember, I said in between we're going to use the 4/0 steel wool. Well, let me show you. I've got the stock that we've already done, and this had some super deep grooves in here. So what we did was took some 220 sandpaper and then follow up with the steel wool, and that lets you see your progress, and you lightly sand. Now this was some huge deep ruts through the wood here. Maybe you can see up here is probably the worst that's left. And we've got that almost down to nothing. This is all smooth. This side we're still working on. But when I'm done smoothing this out a little more, we'll put 3-4 more layers of shellac. It fills those low areas now, and it'll be glass. It'll be absolute glass. And then the final step will just be the steel wool. So I'm going to do a little more sanding to get those as low as possible without building up the shellac too much. We just basically want to get down to where we're leaving the shellac in the grooves and taking off the top layer, and that way it just slowly builds those up and they disappear, and then we put the final coats of shellac on. What we're using is just a little piece of 220 sandpaper, and we're lightly going over it so we don't get down. You don't want to get the sandpaper down into those low spots. You want to ride on top. Take down that upper level so they basically even out. Then we buff it with the 4/0 steel wool, and that allows us to see our progress, and we keep going. You don't want to get back down to bare wood again, and you want to keep it kind of even so those next coats, you know, give you an even look here. Here we're starting to get a little too deep, but we had to because of how deep the marks were there. But that'll all disappear, and you'll see how great this is going to look. So give me a little bit here. We're going to continue our progress, and we'll come back with the final result after the next 3 coats, and it's going to look great. Promise. Okay, guys, we're back. After doing a lot of sanding, a lot of shellacking, a little bit of buffing and reassembly, we are done with our project. And if you remember it before, here you go. How's that look, guys? Incredible, right? What a difference. Look at the color in this rifle. I mean, just gorgeous. Not a flaw in it. Absolutely perfect. And had you seen, or maybe you did see when I showed you all the ripples and sand marks and everything, we didn't really sand the wood so much as we sanded the finish. We allowed the finish to fill in any of the imperfections, and you know, buffed it down with the steel wool, and it fills it in and levels it off and really accentuates. the colors and the glue from the laminate. I think it came out gorgeous. Really happy with it. The Bakelite grip. This gun's ready to go, except for we're going to get rid of this Tapco flash hider here. We've got a Aimer flash hider coming, and that should be here tomorrow, and that'll wrap this gun up. I had an older Romanian grip on here. I got rid of it for this lighter colored one. I think it looks better with the wood. Again, it was pretty simple. Let me put this gun down here real quick. It was pretty simple to do. We started out, just to recap a little bit, we started out with disassembling the rifle. We sanded lightly, and then we took the shellac, put 2-3 light coats on. Again, it's all about doing light coats, because otherwise it takes too long for it to dry in between, and even if you let it dry for quite some time, if there's heavy drips and stuff, it's never going to harden, and you're going to have issues when you go to buff it and sand it. It's going to gum up. So light coats, use the steel wool 4-aught, and every coat just buff it down, and when you get enough on there and it's smooth enough, you're done. Put it back together. Shellac is super forgiving, so if you make a mistake or you got a drip or a sag or a run or it's not filling in, don't worry about it. Just keep going. It'll come out fine. That's about it. All I can think of. The only other thing is, like I said, keeping it, you know, any mistakes that you have or anything. I put this gun together kind of quick. It took about 3 days to do this, and it's still not completely hardened up. And there's a couple little spots maybe you saw in the picture there, but again, I'll just take some steel wool and buff them down, and it'll come out perfect. If you mess it up, scratch it, something like that, you can even take a little denatured alcohol, just damp on a cloth, rub lightly and blend it. Or you can just add some more, another coat of shellac over it and buff it down again. It's the most forgiving product out there, and it's authentic for this rifle and many others. So don't be afraid to try shellac. It's an easy project. Hope you liked it. If you got any questions, please leave some comments below. If you like the rifle, comment below. And as always, like and subscribe. We appreciate it, guys. Thanks very much. Have a great day.